We don't waste time on people who can't afford our cars." The words cut through the showroom as casually as background music, but they made several heads turn. The young mother standing near the financing desk froze for a second, tightening her grip on her purse. Beside her, a little boy in a faded blue hoodie looked up with confused eyes. The salesman didn't seem to care. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and pointed toward the glass entrance. "Maybe try the used lot across town," he said with a smirk. A few employees nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The polished showroom floor reflected rows of luxury SUVs beneath bright LED lights. Fresh coffee drifted from the customer lounge. A giant American flag hung from the ceiling above the newest inventory. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked successful. And yet, something felt rotten underneath the shine. Near the service counter, a woman wearing simple jeans, white sneakers, and a gray zip-up jacket quietly watched the scene unfold. Her dark curls were tucked beneath a baseball cap. No designer handbag. No jewelry. No sign of status. She looked like an ordinary customer killing time while waiting for service. Nobody paid attention to her. Nobody noticed the way her eyes followed every interaction. Nobody realized she had been standing there for nearly 40 minutes. Her name was Vanessa Brooks, and this dealership carried her family name above the front entrance in letters nearly 4 feet tall. Across the showroom, General Manager Derek Whitmore stepped out of his office. Tall, confident, and dressed in an expensive navy suit, he moved with the relaxed authority of someone who believed the building belonged to him. Employees straightened when they saw him. Conversations shifted. Energy changed. Derek glanced toward the young mother and immediately frowned. "What's going on here?" he asked. The salesman chuckled. "Just saving us some time." Derek looked the woman up and down. His expression hardened. "We focus on qualified buyers here." The mother's face fell. Her son lowered his eyes toward the floor. For a brief moment, silence settled over the showroom. Then Derek turned away as if the conversation were finished. The woman slowly gathered her paperwork and headed toward the exit. Nobody stopped her. Nobody offered help. Near the customer lounge, Vanessa felt her stomach tighten. She had reviewed quarterly reports. She had studied profit margins. She had examined customer satisfaction scores. On paper, this location was the crown jewel of Brooks Automotive Group. Record sales, record revenue, record growth. But numbers never told the whole story. Sometimes culture hid in places spreadsheets could never reach. As the glass doors slid open and the young mother stepped into the afternoon sunlight, Vanessa noticed something else. A receptionist named Emily looked devastated. Her fingers hovered above her keyboard. She wanted to say something. She wanted to help, but fear held her in place. Meanwhile, in the service bay visible through the showroom windows, a technician named Marcus Reed watched everything from a distance. His jaw tightened. His wrench stopped moving. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired, like he had seen this before. Vanessa slowly reached into her pocket and felt the folded notebook she had carried all morning. Then she wrote down 3 words. Observed. Confirmed. Worse. And before the hour was over, she would discover that this dealership's biggest problem wasn't hidden in the numbers at all. Vanessa slipped her notebook back into her pocket and continued walking through the dealership as if she were nothing more than another customer waiting for an oil change. The scent of fresh tires and machine lubricant drifted from the service department. Air compressors hissed in the distance. Somewhere overhead, a radio played a country song barely loud enough to rise above the steady hum of business. Everything looked normal. That was what troubled her most. Toxic cultures rarely announced themselves. They hid behind routine. They disguised themselves as policy. They survived because people learned to accept them. Vanessa paused beside a display vehicle and quietly watched the showroom floor. A young salesman approached a well-dressed businessman almost instantly, greeting him with a broad smile and a firm handshake. Less than 30 seconds later, another customer entered through the front doors. This one wore work boots covered in drywall dust and carried a folded estimate sheet. Nobody greeted him. Nobody even looked up. The difference was impossible to miss. Vanessa made another note. Across the room, Emily sat behind the reception desk pretending to organize paperwork. Her eyes occasionally drifted toward Derek's office before quickly looking away. Nervous, careful, watching. Vanessa recognized the expression immediately. She had seen it years ago in employees who wanted to do the right thing but feared the consequences. Through the glass wall of his office, Derek appeared relaxed. He laughed with two senior sales managers while reviewing numbers on a tablet. Revenue charts glowed across the screen. Everyone inside looked pleased. Profits were strong. Bonuses would be strong too. Yet the atmosphere outside that office felt completely different. A few minutes later, Vanessa wandered toward the customer coffee station. As she poured herself a cup, a quiet voice spoke beside her. "You are not really here for service, are you?" Vanessa turned. Marcus Reed stood nearby holding a clipboard. Up close, he looked older than she first thought. Late 40s perhaps. Steady eyes. Calm posture. The kind of man who noticed more than he said. Vanessa offered a small smile. "Why would you think that?" Marcus glanced around before lowering his voice. "Because most customers do not spend an hour watching people instead of their vehicles." Vanessa almost laughed. "Fair observation." Marcus nodded slowly. "Just be careful." His expression remained neutral, but the warning beneath it was unmistakable. People who ask too many questions around here usually stop asking them. Before Vanessa could respond, Marcus walked back toward the service base. The conversation lasted less than 20 seconds. Somehow it told her more than an entire quarterly report. Near noon, activity intensified throughout the dealership. Phones rang. Customers arrived. Sales staff hurried between desks. Vanessa settled into a chair near the waiting area and observed. That was when she heard raised voices from a hallway behind the showroom. Not angry, not loud, frustrated. Emily emerged moments later carrying a stack of folders. Her eyes were glossy. She blinked rapidly and forced herself to keep walking. Derek followed several steps behind. "Either get on board," he said evenly, "or find another place to work." Emily lowered her head and continued moving. Nobody intervened. Nobody asked questions. The entire showroom seemed trained to look away. Vanessa watched Emily disappear through a side door. Then she looked toward Derek. For the first time that day, he met her eyes. His smile appeared polite, but something behind it felt cold. And Vanessa suddenly realized this investigation was going to uncover far more than poor customer service. The afternoon sun drifted across the showroom windows, casting long reflections over rows of polished vehicles. Vanessa remained seated near the waiting area, a paper coffee cup resting untouched in her hands. Around her, business continued as usual, at least on the surface. Beneath the smiles and sales pitches, patterns were beginning to emerge. The same customers received attention. The same customers were ignored. The same employees spoke confidently. The same employees stayed silent. Vanessa had spent 15 years building Brooks Automotive Group from a regional company into a respected national brand. She understood numbers. She understood operations. What she had learned over time was that culture always revealed itself in small moments. A greeting, a glance, a decision nobody thought was important. Near the front entrance, another customer stepped inside. He wore paint-stained work pants and carried a folder under his arm. Before he could approach a desk, one salesman pointed vaguely toward a brochure rack and continued talking with another employee. The customer waited nearly 4 minutes without assistance. Vanessa checked the time on her phone. 4 minutes might not sound significant. In retail, it felt like an eternity. Then something unexpected happened. Marcus emerged from the service department, wiped his hands with a shop towel, and approached the man himself. Within seconds, they were shaking hands. The customer smiled for the first time since entering the building. Vanessa watched carefully. Marcus was not even part of the sales team. Yet he seemed to understand something the others had forgotten. People wanted to feel respected. Across the showroom, Derek stepped out of his office again. His gaze immediately landed on Marcus. A subtle irritation crossed his face. Not dramatic, not obvious, just enough for Vanessa to notice. Derek walked toward the service area. A few moments later, Marcus returned alone. The customer was gone. Marcus's expression remained calm, but his shoulders looked heavier than before. Vanessa added another note to her notebook. Shortly afterward, Emily approached the customer lounge carrying a stack of forms. She nearly passed Vanessa before stopping. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Has anyone helped you today?" Vanessa looked up. "Not really." Emily offered an apologetic smile. "I am sorry about that. We have been busy." The explanation sounded rehearsed. Vanessa noticed the way Emily glanced toward Derek's office before continuing. "If you need anything, I can try to help." "Try, not help." Try. The choice of words caught Vanessa's attention. Before she could answer, a sharp voice echoed from across the room. Emily. The young receptionist immediately straightened. Derek stood beside a sales desk holding a tablet. My office. Now. Emily's smile disappeared. Yes, sir. She walked away quickly. Vanessa followed her with her eyes until the office door closed behind them. Through the glass walls, she could see Derek speaking. Emily barely spoke at all. She simply listened. Occasionally she nodded. At one point she lowered her eyes toward the floor. 10 minutes later, she emerged carrying a small folder pressed tightly against her chest. Her face looked pale. Vanessa waited until Emily returned to her desk before making one final observation. Not a single employee asked if she was all right. Not one. Everyone had learned the same lesson. Keep your head down. Stay quiet. Do not challenge the system. And as Vanessa looked around the showroom bearing her family name, she began to realize that the most profitable dealership in her company might also be the most broken. The dealership grew quieter as the afternoon moved on, but the tension beneath the surface seemed to grow heavier with every passing minute. Vanessa remained in the customer lounge, her notebook resting on her knee while she watched employees move through routines that felt increasingly rehearsed. Every smile appeared measured. Every conversation seemed filtered through caution. Then the side door near the reception area opened, and Emily stepped out carrying a cardboard box. Vanessa immediately sat up straighter. The box was small, barely large enough to hold a framed photo, a coffee mug, and a few office supplies. Emily kept her eyes down as she crossed the showroom floor. No announcement. No explanation. No farewell. Just quiet footsteps against polished tile. Several employees noticed her. None acknowledged her. One salesman glanced up, saw the box, and quickly looked away. Another pretended to focus on his computer screen. The silence surrounding her felt louder than any argument. Vanessa rose from her chair and slowly followed at a distance. Outside, warm sunlight reflected off rows of parked trucks and sport utility vehicles stretching across the lot. Emily stopped beside a compact sedan and placed the box on the hood. For several seconds, she simply stood there staring at it. Vanessa approached carefully. Are you leaving? She asked. Emily looked startled. Then she forced a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Looks that way. What happened? Emily hesitated. Her gaze drifted back toward the building. The giant dealership logo shimmered above the entrance. I asked too many questions. Vanessa remained silent. Emily laughed softly, though there was little humor in it. That probably sounds strange. Not really, Vanessa replied. Emily folded her arms. 3 months ago, I reported discrepancies in customer financing files. Some approvals were being pushed through without proper review. I thought management would want to know. She paused. Instead, they wanted me to stop looking. Vanessa felt her grip tighten around the notebook hidden beneath her jacket. And Derek? Emily gave a small nod. He said I was creating problems. Said I was hurting morale. The words lingered between them. Across the lot, a salesman drove a newly purchased vehicle toward the delivery area. Bright music drifted from speakers mounted near the showroom entrance. Everything still looked successful. Everything still looked perfect. Yet standing beside Emily, Vanessa felt as though she was finally seeing the truth beneath the surface. Did anyone support you? Vanessa asked. Emily smiled sadly. Marcus tried. That answer did not surprise her. But people have families. Bills. Mortgages. Most of them are scared. A gust of wind rolled across the lot, carrying the scent of hot pavement and fresh-cut grass from a nearby property. Emily picked up the box. I should go. Vanessa watched her reach for the driver's door. Then Emily stopped and turned back. You seem different from most people who come here. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Different how? Emily looked toward the dealership one final time. Like you are not just watching cars. For the briefest moment, Vanessa wondered if Emily somehow knew. Then Emily climbed into the sedan and drove away. Vanessa stood alone beneath the afternoon sun, staring after the disappearing car. A receptionist had just lost her job for asking questions. A technician was being quietly pushed aside. Customers were being judged before anyone knew their story. And for the first time all day, Vanessa realized that what she was uncovering was not a few bad decisions. It was an entire system built to protect the wrong people. Vanessa remained in the parking lot long after Emily's sedan disappeared beyond the intersection. The late afternoon sun hung low above the dealership, turning the glass facade into a wall of gold. Customers continued arriving. Salespeople continued smiling. From a distance, everything appeared healthy, successful, professional. But Vanessa now knew better. She walked back inside, carrying the same calm expression she had worn all day. Nobody stopped her. Nobody asked who she was. That alone told her something. A dealership that truly valued people paid attention to everyone who entered its doors. Near the showroom entrance, a retired couple stood examining a mid-sized sport utility vehicle. They looked uncertain. The husband held a folded notebook filled with handwritten calculations. The wife carried a coupon clipped from a local newspaper. They waited patiently for assistance. 5 minutes passed. Then 7. Sales staff walked by repeatedly without stopping. Vanessa watched from across the room. Finally, Marcus stepped away from the service department once again. He greeted them warmly and answered a few questions despite not being part of the sales team. The relief on the couple's faces was immediate. For a brief moment, Vanessa saw what the dealership could have been under different leadership. Then Derek appeared. He crossed the showroom with measured steps and called Marcus aside. Their conversation was quiet, but the tension was impossible to miss. Marcus listened. Derek spoke. When the discussion ended, Marcus returned to the service area while the elderly couple stood alone once again. This time no one came to help them. Vanessa felt a heaviness settle in her chest. The problem was no longer hidden. It was happening in plain sight. As evening approached, employees gathered near the central sales desks to review the day's numbers. Computer screens glowed beneath bright ceiling lights. Derek stood at the front like a commander addressing a team before a championship game. Revenue totals appeared on a large monitor. Applause followed. Bonuses were mentioned. More applause followed. Yet something felt strange. Nobody looked genuinely proud. They looked relieved. Vanessa noticed the difference. Real leadership inspired people. Fear merely controlled them. Then Derek's eyes landed on her. For the second time that day, he walked directly toward her. Several employees immediately became quiet. Conversations faded. Even the clicking of keyboards seemed to slow. Derek stopped beside her chair and offered a polished corporate smile. "Ma'am, you have been here most of the day." "I have," Vanessa replied. "Are you planning to purchase a vehicle?" His tone sounded friendly. His eyes did not. Vanessa met his gaze calmly. "I am still deciding." Derek nodded once. "Then perhaps it is time to decide somewhere else. We have serious customers waiting for assistance." The surrounding employees froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Vanessa could almost feel dozens of eyes shifting between them. Derek remained smiling. The smile somehow made the moment colder. "Are you asking me to leave?" she asked. "I am suggesting that this dealership may not be the right fit for your needs." The showroom fell silent. Somewhere in the distance, a printer stopped humming. A coffee machine finished brewing. Tiny sounds suddenly felt enormous. Vanessa slowly rose from her chair. Derek seemed satisfied. He believed he had removed another inconvenience. Another person he considered unimportant. What he did not realize was that every word spoken that day had been carefully recorded, documented, and observed. And as Vanessa picked up her jacket and looked around the showroom one final time, she knew tomorrow morning would be unlike any day this dealership had ever experienced. The sky was turning shades of orange and deep blue by the time Vanessa pulled into the parking lot of a small hotel nearly 15 miles from the dealership. The engine clicked softly as it cooled. For several moments she remained seated behind the wheel without moving. Traffic rolled past on the nearby highway. Headlights stretched across the evening like streams of white light. In the distance, a freight train sounded its horn. The long, lonely note drifted through the warm summer air before fading into silence. Vanessa leaned back and closed her eyes. The day replayed itself piece by piece. The young mother quietly leaving without help. The retired couple standing alone beside a vehicle they could not get anyone to discuss. Emily carrying a cardboard box toward her car. Marcus repeatedly stepping in where others refused. Derek smiling while pushing people away. One by one, the moments stacked together like pages in a report nobody wanted to read. She opened her notebook. The pages were filled from top to bottom. Names, times, observations, direct quotes. Every line told the same story. Revenue had become more important than people. Fear had become more common than respect. Vanessa stared at the final note she had written before leaving. Culture follows leadership. The words felt heavier now. A soft notification appeared on her phone. then another, then several more. Messages from regional directors, financial updates, performance summaries, the usual stream of corporate information. Vanessa ignored them all. Instead, she opened a secure folder containing employee records. Emily Carter, 3 years with the company. Outstanding customer satisfaction scores. 0 disciplinary actions before the last 6 months. Vanessa continued reading. 2 formal complaints regarding finance irregularities. Both dismissed. She opened another file. Marcus Reed, 22 years with the company. Consistently high evaluations. Trusted by customers. Respected by coworkers. Passed over for promotion 4 times. Vanessa slowly exhaled. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Outside the windshield, the last sunlight slipped below the horizon. Shadows stretched across the parking lot. A maintenance worker pushed a cart toward the hotel entrance. A family unloaded suitcases from a minivan. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. Vanessa found herself thinking about them. The reason her father had started the company decades ago was simple. Reliable transportation changed lives. It helped people reach jobs, schools, hospitals, and opportunities. Somewhere along the way, some leaders had forgotten that mission. They saw transactions instead of people, numbers instead of families. The realization hurt more than she expected. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message came from a member of her executive team. Meeting confirmed. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. All senior dealership leadership required attendance. Vanessa read the message twice. Then she typed a short reply. Include human resources. Include compliance. Include regional operations. Mandatory attendance. She pressed send. The screen went dark. For a moment, the parking lot reflected in the glass of her phone. Then only her own reflection remained. Calm, focused, determined. Tomorrow would not be about revenge. It would not be about embarrassment. It would be about accountability. About protecting employees who had done the right thing. About restoring a culture that had slowly drifted away from the values it was supposed to represent. Vanessa slipped the phone into her pocket and stepped out into the cooling evening air. Above her, the first stars were beginning to appear. The world felt quiet, almost peaceful, yet hundreds of miles of consequences had already begun moving toward the dealership. The people inside simply did not know it yet. At 7:53 the next morning, the conference room overlooking the showroom was already filling with managers. Coffee cups steamed beside laptops. Sales reports were spread across the polished table. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, employees moved across the dealership below, unaware that the most important meeting in the building's history was about to begin. Derek Whitmore sat near the head of the table wearing the same confident expression he carried every day. He reviewed quarterly numbers on a tablet and occasionally exchanged comments with senior staff. The mood felt optimistic. Revenue targets had been exceeded. Bonuses were expected. Everything appeared under control. At exactly 8 o'clock, the large screen mounted on the wall flickered to life. Several executives from corporate headquarters appeared through a video conference link. Regional directors, compliance officers, human resources leadership. A quiet murmur spread around the room. This level of attendance was unusual. Derek straightened in his chair. "Good morning," he said professionally. "We are honored to have everyone here." One executive offered a brief nod, but did not smile. Another shuffled papers without looking up. The atmosphere immediately felt different. Heavier. More formal. Then the conference room door opened. Nobody paid much attention at first. A few assumed it was an assistant delivering documents. But as footsteps crossed the room, conversations gradually stopped. One voice faded. Then another. Chairs stopped moving. Derek turned toward the door. The color slowly drained from his face. Vanessa Brooks entered carrying a leather portfolio and the same notebook she had carried throughout the previous day. Gone were the baseball cap and casual disguise. She wore a tailored navy suit. A silver company pin rested on her lapel. The room became completely silent. Vanessa walked calmly to the front of the table. Nobody spoke. Nobody seemed capable of speaking. Several managers exchanged stunned looks. One employee nearly dropped his pen. Derek stared as though he could not fully process what he was seeing. Vanessa placed the portfolio on the table. Then she looked around the room. "Good morning, everyone." Her voice was calm, professional, steady. The silence deepened. "Yesterday," she continued, "I spent 9 hours inside this dealership." Derek's jaw tightened. Across the table, A sales manager shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Vanessa opened the notebook. Page after page was filled with observations. Times, names, direct quotes, detailed records. I observed customers ignored based on appearance. I observed employees discouraged from raising concerns. I observed repeated failures in leadership accountability. I observed conduct that does not reflect the values of Brooks Automotive Group. Nobody interrupted. On the screen, corporate executives remained silent as well. They already knew what was coming. Vanessa turned another page. I also reviewed personnel records, compliance reports, customer complaints, and internal communications. Derek finally found his voice. Vanessa, I think there may be some misunderstandings. She looked directly at him. The room seemed to stop breathing. No, she said quietly. The misunderstanding occurred when people inside this dealership assumed nobody was paying attention. The words settled over the conference room like a final verdict. For the first time, everyone present understood that the woman they had dismissed as an ordinary customer had been watching everything. And the consequences were only beginning. For several seconds after Vanessa spoke, nobody moved. The conference room felt frozen beneath the bright morning light pouring through the windows. Derek sat perfectly still, his hands resting on the table, while the executives on the screen watched in silence. Vanessa closed her notebook and opened the portfolio beside it. Inside were printed reports, compliance summaries, customer complaints, and employee records. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The evidence spoke clearly enough on its own. One by one, documents appeared on the large display screen mounted behind her. Customer service failures, dismissed complaints, internal warnings that had never been investigated, employee concerns that had quietly disappeared. Every slide seemed heavier than the one before it. Around the table, several managers lowered their eyes. Others stared at the screen without blinking. The confidence that had filled the room earlier that morning had completely vanished. Vanessa turned toward the human resources director appearing on the video call. Please summarize your findings. The director adjusted her glasses and opened a report. Our review identified repeated violations of company policy, including retaliation concerns, improper handling of employee complaints, and conduct inconsistent with corporate standards. The words landed with quiet force. Nobody argued. Nobody objected. Vanessa looked toward another executive. Compliance. The executive nodded. Several issues require immediate corrective action. Some concerns were reported months ago and were never properly addressed. Derek finally leaned forward. I can explain. Vanessa met his eyes calmly. You have had months to explain. Silence followed. A long silence. The kind that forces people to confront truths they can no longer avoid. Vanessa stepped away from the screen and looked around the room. This company was built on trust, she said. Not just trust from customers. Trust from employees. Trust from families who depend on us to do the right thing. Her gaze moved from face to face. Profit matters. Performance matters. But if success comes at the expense of integrity, then it is not success. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded slowly. For the first time, Vanessa noticed something different in the room. Not fear. Reflection. People were beginning to understand that this meeting was not about punishment alone. It was about responsibility. She opened a final folder. Effective immediately, leadership changes will take place. The words echoed softly through the room. Human resources representatives began distributing documents. Corporate executives approved actions already prepared the night before. Some managers were relieved of their positions. Others were placed under formal review. Every decision had been supported by evidence. Every action followed company policy. There were no surprises except for those who believed accountability would never arrive. Then Vanessa reached the final page. Marcus Reed will serve as interim operations manager while the dealership undergoes restructuring. Several heads lifted in surprise. Across the screen, one executive smiled for the first time all morning. Vanessa continued. Emily Carter has been invited to return and join a new compliance and customer advocacy program. The room remained quiet, but the atmosphere had changed. The fear that once controlled the building was beginning to loosen its grip. Through the conference room windows, employees moved across the showroom floor below, unaware that a new chapter had already begun. And as sunlight reflected across the dealership bearing her family name, Vanessa finally saw something she had not seen there the previous day. Hope. 3 months later, The dealership looked almost the same from the outside. The same glass entrance reflected the morning sun. The same rows of vehicles stretched across the lot in perfect lines. The same company logo stood proudly above the building. Yet everything inside felt different. The difference was not immediately visible in reports or revenue charts. It could be seen in the way people greeted one another. It could be heard in conversations that no longer stopped when managers walked by. It lived in dozens of small moments that together created an entirely different culture. Shortly after 9 o'clock, a familiar silver sedan pulled into the customer parking area. The young mother Vanessa had watched leave on that first day stepped out, holding a set of keys. Her son, now smiling instead of confused, climbed out from the passenger side. They had returned for a routine service appointment. This time, before they even reached the front doors, an employee stepped forward to greet them. Not because of how they were dressed, not because of what they could afford, simply because they mattered. Inside the showroom, Emily Carter stood near a customer care desk reviewing feedback reports. The confidence that had once been buried beneath fear had quietly returned. She greeted customers by name. She listened carefully. Most importantly, people listened to her. Nearby, Marcus Reed walked across the showroom floor carrying a clipboard. Employees stopped him regularly with questions. He answered each one patiently. The title on his office door had changed, but very little else about him had. He still treated people the same way he always had, with respect. Through the large front windows, sunlight spilled across the polished floor. Customers moved comfortably between displays. Salespeople offered assistance without judgment. The atmosphere felt lighter, healthier, more human. Late that afternoon, a black SUV rolled quietly into the lot. Vanessa stepped out alone. No announcement had been made. No executives accompanied her. She simply wanted to see the results for herself. As she entered the building, nobody froze. Nobody panicked. Employees greeted her warmly. Customers continued their conversations. The dealership no longer operated through fear. It operated through trust. Vanessa walked slowly through the showroom. She noticed the retired couple she had seen months earlier. They were sitting comfortably in the customer lounge while paperwork for a vehicle trade-in was being completed. Across the room, a young family explored options with a salesperson who treated them with patience and dignity. Every scene reminded her why the company existed in the first place. Near the entrance, Vanessa stopped and looked around one final time. The afternoon sun reflected across the glass walls, filling the building with a soft, golden glow. Somewhere in the distance, a customer laughed. A service advisor opened a door for an elderly guest. Phones rang. Conversations continued. Ordinary sounds. Yet they felt meaningful. Marcus noticed her standing there and walked over. "Things look different," he said. Vanessa smiled. "They do." Marcus nodded toward the showroom floor. People notice when leadership means what it says. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply watched customers and employees moving through the space together. Then Marcus returned to work. Vanessa remained where she was. Quiet. Thoughtful. The same dealership that once measured people by appearances now measured itself by something far more important. Character. As the sun dipped lower outside and warm light stretched across the floor beneath her feet, Vanessa turned toward the exit. Behind her, the dealership continued forward without fanfare, without applause, and without anyone needing to announce what had changed. Because sometimes the strongest sign of justice is not a celebration. Sometimes it is the quiet confidence of people finally being treated the way they always should have been.